Do you really need something crunchy? I know you might think you do, but I don't think you do. And in this talk, I'm going to explain why. This one comes up all the time. Almost apologetically, women will say to me, I was elbows deep in the bag of tortilla chips and queso dip. My body must have needed the salt. I just needed the crunch, they'll say. I think I just needed the crunch. And I think it's such an interesting statement because when I think about that as a nutritionist, I want to think mechanistically. Why would we need crunch? There's no nutritional benefit to crunch per se. You don't have a crunch insufficiency. So why would you need the crunch? Some people might say, well, I reached for the chips and queso because I think I needed the salt. Fair enough. Sodium craving. Now we're talking. The body does cue up cravings for certain nutrients that we need. That's biologically true. However, I think this has been a little confused over the years, and now we have going on here is a conditioned response. I wanted something, I had the thing, it lit up my dopamine receptors, I need crunch is more of a conditioned response than anything pertinent to a biological need. But there's a lot of factors at play here that I think would be interesting to touch on, so please buckle up. I'm going to take you through why you think you crave crunch when really you probably don't. Picture it. It's 9:30 at night. You're watching a show. You're not hungry, but you want a little something. I want a little something. I just need something crunchy. I just need that crunch. So you pull out the bag of chips. One handful becomes 5 handfuls. Now you're scraping the bottom of the bag. Now you're in the coaching call with me the next day, apologizing and feeling bad about having eaten so many chips because now you have a stomach ache and you're worried that you've set back your health goals and your weight loss goals. But you tell yourself, I think I needed the crunch. Why do we crave crunch is the question I want to answer. Is there something there in the craving of the crunch that's worth exploring? And how do cravings show up from our body? How does our body tell us what nutrients it needs? And I really do want to spend some time talking about the conditioned response, literally the Pavlovian response to certain foods. Basically, we train ourselves to want the thing, whether we need it or not. So cravings, just when I think about the word craving, it has two halves to it, right? The definition of a craving might be a biological need for something, craving, or I really, 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 really want it, craving. Need and want are two different things. Want is just a want. It's just a conscious or maybe semi-conscious decision to have something that seems yummy or delightful or interesting to you. Yesterday, I was craving a can of chicken noodle soup, for example. And I, by the way, indulged this craving. I went and got a can of soup. Now, no hate, no shade to canned soup, but I make really good soup. I make beautiful broth and soup. It's one of the few things I'm good at making. But I wanted a can of chicken noodle soup. So I went and got it. It scratched an itch. It was a nostalgic moment for me because I used to eat canned chicken noodle soup all the time. Did my body have a chicken noodle soup deficiency? No, definitely not. Was there something in the soup that my body was craving? Well, canned soup is very high in sodium. Maybe I could say, my body wanted the salt. No, I just really wanted chicken noodle soup. We do have to accept that, yes, in some cases, cravings are the body queuing up a need, but I think more often it's just something that you want. And if you want it, you can have it. You're a grown-ass adult. But if you also want to improve your health and you want to change the way you eat, then the want to change the way you eat has to, over time, trump the want for the bag of chips and queso, if that makes sense. So that's why the conditioned response thing is a really interesting concept to noodle on. Oh my God, noodle. See how I just brought that back to chicken noodle soup? Amazing. Let's talk about crunch. Crunch is a texture. You bite it, it sends back a signal. There's a really interesting signal that gets sent back when you bite something crunchy, that sound, that feeling. It's loud, it's tactile, it's very engaging. It kind of is a nervous system stimulant. I think that sometimes if we're bored, crunch can seem exciting. Eating when you're bored, boredom eating, a crunchy thing seems exciting on some really rudimentary level. I think there's something there, like a nervous system moment. Crunchy foods are also kind of overstimulating because crunchy foods rarely exist in nature. Think about it. What's really crunchy that exists in nature? I mean, celery, carrots. So vegetables are crunchy. Okay, those are kind of seasonally available to us. Nuts are crunchy. Those aren't highly available in our diet. So there's novelty to crunchy stuff, I always think about nutrition from the perspective of like ancestral health. Why would our body want crunch or find it interesting? It's just kind of a novel eating experience, really. But it can also signal freshness. Like if you think about fresh celery versus old celery, one's way crunchier than the other. So there's a signal in terms of plant foods of freshness if it's crunchy. But modern foods tend to really hijack this primal instinct because I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is that crunchy, fresh plant foods was kind of a novel input in our environment. Now there's 75 flavors of Doritos. So you can have a crunch in every flavor under the rainbow if you want. So modern foods have really hijacked that primal instinct for the occasional crunchy thing that's novel. We can have it all the time. I don't know if it's dopaminergic per se. I don't know if we can say that crunchy foods are necessarily like the crunch of it all. The act of crunching is dopaminergic. But a Dorito is crunchy and it also has starch and salt and fat, which is dopaminergic. A carrot doesn't have that. A celery doesn't have that. A celery has crunch, but does not have the dopaminergic elements that a Dorito has. So there's a lot of crazy hijacking going on. And this is going to sound like complete nutritionist garbage, but if you really wanted something crunchy, just go eat some celery, right? Somebody might say that. If you're not hungry for celery, then you're not really craving crunch. You're just craving Doritos, okay? And Doritos are intentionally craveable. The food engineers that made Doritos made them craveable. So do we really want crunch or do we just want that dopaminergic moment from the chips? I think there's a real innocence, which is beautiful, to say, I just wanted crunch. But the evil sort of shadow side to that is, yeah, that's been hijacked by hyper-palatable, hyper-processed foods that make crunchy things very, very interesting from a dopamine receptor perspective. Because you already know this, you've heard this a million times, that the combination of starch and salt and fat, those things are put together, like in French fries or Doritos or whatever it might be, buttered popcorn at the movie theater. That combination is so enticing to our brain, which our brain is wired for famine and starvation. It's like, ooh, you should eat all of that. Gives you that dopamine sort of wave. You can't necessarily feel dopamine. It's not a conscious feeling you have, but you become very trained, very, very trained to want that. So when people say, I wanted the crunch, it's like, of course you did. Food engineers have made it so that you believe that you have just this want for crunch. It's just the want for potato chips, if that makes sense. I was thinking, like, is there something in the act of chewing that is enjoyable or stress relieving, or does it send an interesting signal to the nervous system? This is something that I speak about a lot with my clients. For example, I like my clients to eat protein foods. You already know you need to have more protein in your diet, but I say, can you please eat protein food? Put it in your mouth, bite, chew, gnaw, chew, 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 swallow. Have that eating experience, the action of the jaw, the mechanical action of the jaw and the tongue and everything in your mouth, which is the gatekeeper of your satiety signal, your appetite signal is the mouth. So your mouth can have the experience of chewing food. I think there's something really interesting to that. This is something that I really should do a lot more research into because to me, it makes sense that when we eat, there's a whole process of eating, right? And it starts with biting and chewing. If you're drinking a protein shake, for example, you're not getting that bite chew experience. I think it just sort of leapfrogs over one of these really essential signals. But crunchy foods really hit that chewing experience hard. And it's very tactile and engaging, the experience of chewing crunchy things. So is there something about our body wanting to chew? Does our body just want to freaking chew something? Because we've been drinking protein shakes and eating yogurt all day long. I think your body just wants to chew something. So you could chew on a steak and you're getting that chew signal. Something to try. I'll tell you that. I don't personally have any crunch cravings. Not to say that I don't eat crunchy things, but I'm never like, ooh, I gotta have a crunchy thing. I gotta chew something because I'm chewing all the time. I chew meat. I get my chew needs met from meat and vegetables and fruit. I don't need to go get it from Doritos. Now, another thing I want to think about is, okay, so crunchy foods, what nutritionally are they? If you need crunch, is there some nutritional itch that you're scratching? And so first of all, I think, okay, well, crunchy foods are typically in the carbohydrate family. They just are, right? No hate, no shade to carbohydrates, but a vegetable, a crunchy apple, a Dorito, it's all carbohydrate-based food. Typically, not always, but, starchy, carby food, fast type carbohydrate. Because, we have high fiber foods, for example, like avocado, oatmeal, they have a lot of fiber and they're not crunchy per se. Things that are starchy, like a potato chip, a French fry, that's got that good satisfying crunch. So is there a starch need? What is the deal with starch? Well, starchy foods, unlike high fiber foods, because they're different, starchy foods don't have the fiber per se. They're faster. Starch is like a fast carbohydrate. Fiber is more of a slow carbohydrate. Fast and slow. It's really important to have fast and slow fuels. Again, like I'm not villainizing one or the other, but differentiating, I would say. Starch is a very fast fuel. Is there some reason why your body is craving fast fuel? I think a lot of people who are metabolically dysregulated are running on fast fuels to a problematic degree. We're in this fast fuel paradigm. I need to eat every 2 hours. I need to have my crunchy foods. I need to snack and nibble and munch on crunchy things and starchy things. I need the sugar hit. That's, to me, a signal of metabolic dysregulation. I don't love that for you. I think that's a problem to solve, quite honestly. Your brain connects the act of consuming starch to the quick hit of energy, and that's very rewarding to the brain. It becomes very rewarding. This is the conditioned response that I spoke about earlier. Crunchy, starchy foods give that fast glucose hit to the brain. There's a dopamine response to that. Your brain is like, yes to that, do more of that. Now you're in the Pavlovian loop. And my perspective on this, based on my clinical experience working with thousands of women, most of whom have some kind of sugar, quote unquote, addiction. I'm using air quotes, heavy ones if you can't hear them. I don't think women are sugar addicts. I just don't think you are. I just think you have created a very strong conditioned response. I want something crunchy. I had something crunchy. Kapow, dopamine. Now you're in the loop. If you really truly want to get out of the chips and queso binges in the pantry, break the loop. Instead of having that crunchy starch moment, have a little savory something that's maybe not crunchy. Like if it's chips that you want, go get a nice bit of cheese and maybe some cured meat, a little charcuterie moment with maybe some olives. So it's like savory flavors that aren't crunchy at all. If you really want to solve this, if you say, I need something crunchy, I just told you, you don't have a nutritional need for crunch. You just want it. If you'd like to stop wanting it, the way to stop wanting it is to change the input. This, by the way, this is one of my favorite hacks for anybody who struggles with like carb or sugar binges, if you identify as that. And I have a little resource that I'm just going to mention. I don't usually do this, but I happen to have a resource. So listen to this. Here's the URL, eatsimple.ca/sugar. You can download my free sugar craving solution ebook. It talks about the conditioned response and the Pavlovian loop that you get stuck in and how to break it. I talk about that very specifically in there. These conditioned responses, these Pavlovian loops, they are hard to break. Definitely, objectively hard. Very strongly patterned in your brain. Women will say to me, I'm not hungry, but I just I'm just doing it out of habit. Yes, just doing it out of habit is you sort of in a conditioned loop. You're not even necessarily consciously opting into this. It's just the thing you do. If it's a habit you'd like to change, you can change it, but you have to absolutely short circuit that loop. The other thing about these foods, these starchy foods, is they are crunchy, which means they're probably relatively low in protein, just because protein's not typically crunchy. I know they make protein pretzels now and protein chips, which is a weird abomination, and I hate that those things exist. And I just really, really wish you get your protein from meat. That's all I'm asking. But typically, starchy, crunchy foods are low in protein. They have, therefore, very low satiety factor. So it's kind of like you can keep eating them. And here's where the shame of it all comes in, because it's like, look, if you want something crunchy, go ahead and have something crunchy. It's not the end of the world. But then what happens is I wanted something crunchy. I went into the pantry. Before I knew it, the whole bag of Doritos was gone. Now I'm in the shame spiral feeling bad about myself. It's like, well, yeah, Doritos are intentionally bingeable. They're not satiating. There's no breaks. So I do think this is one of the reasons why it would be worthwhile to explore short-circuiting the starch-sugar loop. There are moments where you do crave more carbohydrate. For example, if you had consistently bad sleep, this shows up in the sleep research all the time. Even one night of poor sleep renders you a little, quote-unquote, insulin resistant. Insulin resistant people crave sugar. And I was insulin resistant to a very high degree. I was pre-diabetic. All I wanted was sugar and starch mostly. I didn't really want sugar that much, but I did definitely, indulge in candy quite a bit, especially during my 3 p.m. major blood sugar crash. But my little cells, which are resistant to the hormone insulin, were just like, hey, just give us more sugar. And we know this happens after even one night of poor sleep. Another time when you might have more carbohydrate cravings is in the luteal phase of your cycle if you're a woman who has a cycle still. And I just add that caveat because I myself am a woman whose cycle is changing. So I don't really necessarily have these clear signals anymore. But even just a few years ago, it's crazy to me that I only clocked this in my 40s. I wish I had learned this about myself sooner. It's just interesting to know. I noticed that I had more cravings the week before my period. And I would just say, like, ooh, I've got PMS cravings. We would generalize this experience of having cravings. But then I just tried to pinpoint it. Like, well, what am I craving? And it was always sugar, starchy, carbs, that kind of thing. So I went down a little rabbit hole to learn, and this is great to know. This is why I wish I'd known this sooner, that every month of our fertile years, our body really thinks we're going to have a fertilized egg. And it's in that luteal phase right before your body realizes, oh, the egg isn't fertilized. Let's get rid of the uterine lining, which is your period. But right up until that moment, your body's like, we've got a baby, until it realizes it doesn't. So in that luteal phase, right before your period, sugar cravings ramp up because your body is biologically, metabolically preparing to start growing a baby, to grow a baby. So we have more carbohydrate need at that time. I just think that's beautiful. Like, as soon as I learned that, I immediately loved it because we came through the era of villainizing carbohydrates. We all did. We all did keto, right? Then it was like, oh, wait, my amazing, miraculous female body, this reproductive powerhouse, actually needs more carbohydrate when it's trying to grow a baby. Now, I never had babies. At no point in my fertile years did that ever happen for me. But every month my body thought it was going to. And I just think that's gorgeous. I just think that's amazing. So what I did over time was I learned, oh, these are simply carbohydrate cravings. This is a glucose craving. And my body wants it. You know what? I'm going to gosh darn give it to my body, but it doesn't have to be Doritos. It doesn't have to be the whole pint of ice cream. Just because it's a carbohydrate craving or sugar craving, which is the same thing, doesn't mean it has to be shit food. It can be. You can certainly say, this is my Dorito day, baby. Let's go. Cool Ranch all the way. Or you might say, let's go out for a massive sushi feast. Or, hey, you know what? Cherries are in season. I'm going to eat the whole bag and make myself ill. Or I'm going to have a big old bowl of roasted potatoes for dinner. Like, I'm going to invite in the carbohydrate, the starch, the sugar that my body wants because my body's asking for it. And I love and trust my body and respect it. I'm going to give it. It doesn't have to be absolute shit food, though. It doesn't have to be these bingeable, hyper-palatable, hyper-processed foods that just get you into trouble. I never want you to feel badly about treating yourself to a Doritos, for example. But if you do feel badly about yourself, then I think that's a problem you should solve. Why would any food have that power over you? If Doritos makes you feel depressed about yourself, then don't invite them into your home. If you have a starch craving, go get some sushi. Go get some fruit. Go have some potatoes. You don't have to have junk food just because you're in a PMS craving cycle, although you certainly can. You are a grown-ass adult. Just to summarize that little section, which is, okay, why would we have starch cravings? And there's a lot of reasons for them. I do want to just reiterate, the modern food environment is full of very starchy, hyperpalatable processed foods that are designed by food engineers to be utterly bingeable with no satiety at all. So if you think that's some defect that you can't stop eating the Doritos, you can't stop wanting the Doritos, that's how the Dorito manufacturers made them. That always sounds conspiratorial, and I don't consider myself a conspiratorial person, but I think that's generally conventionally accepted. It comes down to this idea of, I was craving it, my body must really be insufficient in some nutrient. So we've already established you definitely don't have a Dorito insufficiency. That's not what's happening here. You probably also don't have a carbohydrate insufficiency, so you're not in danger of running out of sugar. It's not likely. But there are insufficiencies that can show up as cravings that can be confusing. And one of those is salt. Sodium is incredibly essential in our diet. And by this point, I hope most of us have learned and figured out that the salt-fearing time, the fear-mongering time of salt is now gone. We've moved past that time of our life. We now realize salt is actually really important in the diet. We actually need something like 5 grams of salt a day to manage fluid balance. Sodium and potassium are responsible for getting the fluid into your cells and tissues. So you can drink all the water you want. You can cart around your Stanley mug and drink water. But if you don't have enough sodium and potassium to facilitate moving that water into your cells and tissues, you're actually not hydrating. You're drinking water, but you're not hydrating without salt. And your drive for salt is strong, way stronger than your drive for sugar. I think the sugar drive is the conditioned response. The hyperpalatable food thing makes that feel very powerful, but you're not in danger of running out of sugar. Like, it's not going to happen. You're not going to starve of sugar, carbohydrate. You have plenty of access to it, not only in your diet, but also in your body. You have 2,000 calories of glycogen in your body that your body can tap into if it happens to need glucose. But you need salt to facilitate hydration. And you know that hydration is mission critical. Food you could live without for a while, but water you need. You need hydration, and salt is part of that. It's really interesting. I'm watching Alone right now. I love that show, by the way. As a nutritionist who geeks out on evolutionary biology and the survival, the way our DNA has wired us for survival, like watching a survival show like Alone is very cool. One of the contestants on Alone right now, because they're allowed to bring like 10 items with them, they have nothing, but they're allowed to bring 10 items. So like a knife and some rope or whatever. They can bring their arrows and their bow. One guy brought a giant block of salt, Himalayan salt, like a chunk of salt. And he's putting salt in his water. He's putting salt in when he catches a fish. He's salting the heck out of it, potentially just eating salt sometimes. I don't know. And I think that's such a smart play because he's going to be able to hydrate more intelligently with sodium. And you think about people who are hunting and gathering, like the contestants on Alone, they don't have a high sodium diet. The reason why sodium was really villainized is because processed food is very high in sodium. Doritos are very high in sodium, too high. Not a healthy balance of sodium, potassium, and it's just very out of whack, shall we say. So when processed food became this big deal, people started having more heart attacks. They were like, it must be the sodium. It was kind of a weird correlation. If you're eating a healthy diet, which I really hope you are, then there's a good chance you're not getting enough sodium unless you're salting your food appropriately. Your brain will ask you for sodium because it's really, really crucial. Now, you might get that salt craving and think Doritos, chips and queso, whatever it might be. Okay, so yes, those things are salty, but now they're also hyperpalatable, starchy. Now you've created, unfortunately, in trying to satisfy your salt craving, you've now created the conditioned response for starchy, hyperpalatable foods. That's going to be hard to break. The craving was pure for salt, and we answered it with kind of the wrong thing. I'm using more air quotes. You could just put more salt on your food, put salt on your meat, salt in your eggs. You can drink a salty electrolyte drink if you want. However you want to get proper salt in your diet. Relying on Doritos as your source of sodium isn't a great plan because Doritos, as I mentioned already, have been manufactured by food scientists to be hyperpalatable, and you're going to have a really hard time getting out of that Pavlovian loop. Remember when I said earlier that the combination of starch and fat and salt were hyperpalatable dopaminergic? Starch and fat are fuel, and it's like if we're wired for starvation, then the most storable fuel is what we want. So get that starch. Fast fuel, very easy to store. Get that fat, totally storable, really nice fuel that's got a good staying power. And salt, we have a biological need for it. So if you can find a food that has fat, starch, and salt together in one, your brain is like, holy shit, because that doesn't actually exist in nature. There's nothing like that in nature. We have to make that. That's in the modern food environment only. We don't binge on salt. Frankly, if you thought your body was craving salt, you could just go pour some salt on your tongue and nip it in the bud, but you would never do that. We need some kind of substrate to get the salt in. Now I'm saying, why don't you salt your meat? Put salt on your eggs, put salt on I do a tomato avocado salad with this chunky salt. It's so good, or salt drink, whatever. Instead, we rely on a substrate, which is like chips and queso or something like that. Now we become addicted to the substrate. We binge the substrate in an effort to get salt. It's the salt delivery system that trips you up. Sometimes when you get a craving, it's your body needs something, salt perhaps. But also a bigger part of it, as far as I'm concerned, is that you just want it because you've trained your brain to really want it through using these hyperpalatable substrates to get in the salt. Now we say, I need something crunchy. My friend, you're just a Pavlov's dog who has learned to wag its tail and drool at the idea of crunchy things. That's all. And that is a breakable loop if you want to. What sometimes is offered as the solution, and I don't think this is a good solution, by the way, is, okay, well, if you feel like you want something crunchy, just ask yourself, am I really hungry, or is this just a random craving? I don't think you're going to do that. I just think that takes a little bit more presence and mindfulness than most people have currently. I don't think that's a great place to start. I do think The place to start is the short-circuiting technique I mentioned earlier. This is also outlined in my sugar cravings solution ebook, which you can get for free at eatsimple.ca/sugar. The way to solve or troubleshoot this crunch need, if you want to, because if you're like, look, I need to get my act together. I got to quit eating Doritos because it's definitely getting in the way of my weight loss goals. You don't need a nutritionist to tell you that binging Doritos is getting in the way of your weight loss goals. So if you're like, okay, I got to get this whole condition response thing under control. How do I do this? I lean on the replacement method, which is, okay, give yourself something that's very delicious and that you enjoy, but does not push any of those buttons. It doesn't push that starch, fat, salt combo. So I said olives. Okay, olives are kind of salty. They're fatty, but they're not starchy. And old cheddar cheese is fatty and salty, but not starchy. And cured meat's fatty and salty, but not starchy. It doesn't have all three of the things, right? I think even this is where yogurt is really interesting, as much as I think yogurt is overplayed. Have a nice creamy bowl of Greek yogurt. It's got fat maybe, or maybe it's fat-free. It's satiating. It's at least satiating. It satiates hunger. Have something different to short circuit that need for crunch. I don't think you need crunch, but you think you need crunch. If you think you need crunch, what I think you need is to break the crunch loop. Now, you could also say, well, if I want something crunchy, should I just have crunchy things like carrots or celery? And it's like, yeah, I mean, you can, but I just don't think that's going to satisfy the thing you're trying to satisfy. I don't think crunch is what you really need, actually. When you say I need crunch, what I hear is I need a dopamine hit. And carrots and celery aren't going to come close. You're still going to be chasing the crunch of the Doritos afterwards. So I do think that having something that is in the neighborhood of being almost dopaminergic, like charcuterie. It's like, this is yummy, but it's not quite giving my brain exactly what it needed. I am dismantling that Pavlovian response a little bit with this. Also, by the way, meat, cheese, and olives is satiating. So you're not in danger of binging on that, but you can absolutely binge the hell out of Doritos. The other thing I will offer that I think is a global helper for anything in the realm of any kind of unmanageable craving or mindless eating. And by that, I mean, if it's like, I crave crunchy things, I crave salty things, I have a sweet tooth, I'm a mindless eater, I'm a boredom eater, I'm a stress eater, I'm an emotional eater. All these pathologies that we basically diagnose ourselves with. I really do think the solution to this, generally speaking, is to be very well fed at meal times. If you're well fed at meal times, the totality of your snack urges drops significantly. And then you don't even have to worry about, do I want crunch or do I just need salt, or is my body asking me for magnesium and that's why I want the chocolate? You can quit all that mental gymnastics and just say, oh, I'm not really hungry. You won't even notice that you're not hungry. You just won't be as hungry when you consume meals that actually nourish you. And ideally, those meals have a good amount of salt in them. So we're meeting our salt needs at meal times. So we're not chasing our salt needs and battling our brain's call for salt and then binging on salt substrate, which would be Doritos. Eat meals and put salt on them. By the way, I go back to something I touched on earlier, which is I want you to eat protein. I'm sick and tired of women slurping protein, yogurt, drinks, whatever, cottage cheese. It's crazy. If you're eating meat, you're going to put salt on it. Kapow, you just satisfied your protein needs and your sodium needs. You are done. You're good. Your body's not going to ask for much of anything when you've eaten meat with salt on it. It's a real problem solver, eating proper meals. I know I'm a broken record. That's my solution for everything. But lo and behold, it's my solution for this too. If you think you need something crunchy, I'm here to tell you, you don't need crunch. You do not have a crunch insufficiency. I promise you that. You want crunch. You've really trained yourself to enjoy hyperpalatable, crunchy processed foods. If you were well fed and well electrolyted, salted at meal times, a lot of that craving would just cease to exist and you wouldn't have to worry about categorizing it. So next time you think you're craving crunch, I want you to think about this. What are you really craving? Is it just adequate nutrition at meal times? Is it some salt? Is it your time of the month and you're actually just craving carbohydrate? In which case, I say answer it. But you don't have to answer it with Doritos and things that make you feel badly about yourself. I call these unsupportive foods. And it's not that they're bad, it's just that you have to battle them and they make you feel a certain way about yourself. And then you have to battle the psychosocial aspect of being the kind of person who binges on Doritos because I have PMS cravings. It's like, then don't. Then go for sushi and feel great about it. That you gave your body what it asked for, but you didn't over-consume honestly a hyperprocessed junk food. It all comes down to fully nourishing your body with what it needs and asks for when it cues up a hunger signal. When your body cues up a hunger signal, just try answering it all the way with protein-forward meals that are salted and go all the way to your satiety point, and the totality of your cravings dampens immensely. You don't need crunch, you just want it, and that's okay. But if you want to change that want, you got to short circuit this Pavlovian loop.